Okay, up next we have Daphne Kingsley and Cameron Genter of Light Root Community Farm. They operate a small grass-based dairy and diversified farm producing raw milk herd shares, pasture-raised organic chicken eggs, and a mix of fall vegetable crops on 60 acres off Arapahoe Road. They use farm-made compost, managed intensive grazing, cover cropping, and low-impact tillage with draft horsepower to improve their soil. All right.
I'm Cameron Daphne. We have about 65 acres where we're farming on here at 75th and Arapahoe in East Boulder. I think we're gonna, so we run a raw milk dairy, pastured chickens for eggs, some vegetables, and that's kind of our main farming enterprise. We do have a nonprofit, we do a lot of educational and therapeutic type programs on the farm, but for this context, we're just gonna be talking about the pasture and the grazing. I've been rotational grazing for 25 years, maybe a little more, starting in California, Maine, Vermont, Wisconsin. And so, you know, we got into it. I read a book, anybody ever Andre Voisin, by chance? He was back in the 80s, 70s, a French guy. He called it rational grazing, actually, because he was rationing out the grass. But they did a lot of research and found that, hey, if we ration this out and manage it, we can get a lot more production, as Carl said, you know, off the grass. So that's kind of when I read my first book, and we started grazing sheep and horses and cows, kind of a mixed graze in California on the farm we worked at. We did a lot of the netting, fencing. It was very labor intensive. And then, yeah, East Coast, very popular. A lot of rain, a lot of grass. In the morning move them, you graze things 6 times a year, like to be on top of it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good background. Like, come from Colorado, we've been here for 10 years, and I think it is interesting. The high desert, dry climate is different. They're different work with rotational grazing. So share some of that.
Yeah. I mean, it's, you know, rotational grazing, management, intensive grazing. How many people have done rotational grazing in here? Yeah, okay, so we've all heard of it. So it's not as popular out here, but because it's dry, you know, you're not going to get quite the bang as you are in the more moist areas. But with irrigated pasture, you can. Yeah. So we just kind of talk about, you know, grasses a lot. What do we got? So our farm where we're at has kind of an existing pasture with smooth brome, alfalfa, and a little bit of tall fescue, a little dandelion. It's not super diverse. There's some bindweed and curly dock that come in. And so that's sort of one type of pasture that we graze. And then we've seeded in probably, I don't know, 15 acres, more of improved varieties, the meadow brome, orchard grass, alfalfa, clover, trefoil, like the fescue right crosses, improved tall fescues that don't have the end-of-fight problem, and since we threw in some chicory and plantains to kind of get diversity. Then of course we graze some wet areas. They're not really great grazing areas, to be honest with you.
And the one thing with dairy cows too, since we're focused on milk production, dairy cows they're kind of they need high quality feeds. You don't necessarily want to push them to eat like your sedges and your rushes per se, because you're going to see it in the milk production, and you're going to maybe see it the flavor too. So yeah, just really going for high quality forage for the dairy.
And the reason I brought this up, because you know, each grass has its own growth habit and style and how it wants to be managed, how it grows. So we kind of manage those two a little differently. The smooth brome pastures, they kind of dominate in this area because they're very colonizing and competitive. They kind of take over. Sometimes they can even sod down things. So it's great in that they do good and they do really good in the drought, but it's also, you know, they have the downside. So with the new seedings, we get much more production. We graze them a little harder.
As long as we can irrigate.
As long as we can irrigate, yeah. They don't do as good without the irrigation. So we're kind of balancing those out when we graze. We have different management for each one. And you know, even the smooth brome will graze a little differently in the spring as it gets a little warmer. The growing point gets a little higher, so you've got to watch out a little bit. So, you know, these are some of the basic principles. Like I said, maybe you guys know this already, but the two main things is how long they're in, and then you got to get them out, and then how long do you rest it until it comes back. That's it. You know, those are the main principles. So, you know, as a dairy, we try to, if they're in this room, let's just say there's one cow, she'll be in here for no more than 4 days. That would be the kind of like max, you know, for us in our philosophy. And obviously, if you can move them every 12 hours, you know, it's going to be better. You know, get them in, get them out. So
that 4-day limit is because that's when the grass starts to regrow.
Right.
So if the cow comes back and nips it after that 4-day period, you're kind of setting the little plant back at that point. But if you can get them out of that same spot within 4 days, you're not going to keep setting the plant back. It'll actually start to regrow at that point.
right. And then, of course, recovery time. Some days in the spring, you know, it's quick and you're rolling. 12 days, you know, they're in and you can be back in 12 days. Obviously, things dry out here. If you don't, it could be all summer. It could be till next year, you know, depending. But if you can irrigate, you know, it takes some time, but it might take 40, 50 days to get back into that same pasture. So we're always managing that.
Yeah, the rest time can be, I think in the spring, like Cameron said, faster, but depending on irrigation, dry weather, or heat, you know, if it's really hot, the grass is really slow down.
Yeah.
So yeah, that rest period, it might be 60 days before you can hit something up again, before it has like adequate biomass to actually,
Right.
you know, actually graze.
Right. So just, you know, when we're like, you know, we got somebody new that hasn't grazed before, we're bringing them onto the farm, they're working for us or something, how do we figure out how big a paddock for the cows, you know? And so I just talk about like dry matter, sort of what we like to sort of describe. It's hard to know how much a cow, how much feed's out there, right? So of course, from experience, you can just look, but like, you know, basically look at the, you know, if a dairy cow needs 40 pounds a day, you know, you're gonna need 10 cows, that's 400 pounds a day. Let's just say, that's what you need for that day. And so I always say hay baling shows your dry matter yields, of course, but you're not usually grazing hay, so you kind of got to use some, you know, judgment to sort of say, okay, is that half of the yield, and depending how dense the pasture is, or whatever the hay field. So I just gave an example. Let's just say you're going to get 2 ton an acre of hay of a smooth brome hay crop, you know, and so you have 1 ton of the acre that's out there now. It's like half the crop. Say it's May 15th or something. You're going to have about 2,000 pounds out there. I'm just doing some math, but you know, the thing about grazing is we don't always graze all the way down to the ground like with hay. There's always some residue. Really. So
Which ideally you want, like
yes.
4-inch residue, just
Yeah.
so that you know, have some reserve to grow back.
And you know, certain grasses like orchard grass you can eat real hard. Brome, depending on where it's at in its growth cycle, you don't want to hit it too hard. So spring, we always ease the cows in. It's just we have, there's a couple reasons. One, it's not good to switch them over as we know, but also for the taste of raw milk. I don't know if you guys have experienced that, but if you go right into the grass, there's sometimes a fishy taste even.
And we're all grass-fed dairy, so no grain, which can sometimes buffer that. That extra carbohydrate in their system can buffer that full grass diet. But if you're going into like lush, really proteinaceous spring grass off like a hay diet, one, Carl had a great manure picture, they're going to get really squirty on the back end, and that's not good for them. And it will come through in the flavor of the milk, and we're always trying to balance just high quality milk that people really like. And so we'll usually, in spring, we'll usually have them stay in and kind of force them to eat hay in the morning. They start to kind of snub it, but we want to get some hay in their gut, and then they'll go out for grazing in the afternoons when ideally sugars are highest in the grass, so it's a little more balanced in their system.
Yeah. So, and then of course spring you're moving them fast because the grass, you're not going to be able to keep up. The sweet spot is always hard to actually really have a hit for too long, you know. So it's just what you're facing. So summer at some point, things are going back, and then we usually, by the way, we cut half our farm in hay and half of it in grazing, typically.
For first crop.
Right. So at some point in time, we do graze taller grasses. It's not ideal for milk production, at least. And it's a lot more work for them when they have to chew, 3-foot tall stems. But I like them out on pasture. I like them grazing. It's just healthy for the cow, healthier for the soil, and just good quality milk. So, and then we relax in the fall. We don't do as much rotational grazing in the fall because if our water shuts off on August 1st or so, and so.
And if there's no rain, nothing's regrowing.
Yeah, so we turn them out and relax quite a bit. We're less intense about it in the fall here in Colorado. Of course, in other parts of the country, you just keep it rolling because there's rain. But again, for dairy cows, we don't necessarily want them to be all of a sudden on 100% sedan or wheat. It can affect
or rye.
or rye. It can affect the quality of the milk. Boom, paddock land. I just want quick example. Just how we do it, or one way to do it, depending on the field. But our lanes are like 15 feet wide. We have cows with horns, so it gets a little tricky. I'd like to make them sometimes narrower than that, but they'll get pushed out of the fence. And sometimes if our lanes are longer, because our animal, we don't put water in each paddock, so there's a central location. Just the way our farm is, we're able to have a kind of a central water location, which saves on labor. Yeah, a couple central spots. So you got to watch out. They're going to be walking back and forth. There's the lower cow gets halfway down, and there's a big cow. She's got to go all the way back. So we want to have enough room that nobody gets pushed out, and they can get around each other. So reels, step-in posts, twine. That's our main thing. We got
solid perimeter fence.
Yes. Yes. So
then we use all poly twine inside.
Oh, yeah.
Interior.
The one thing about the lanes is, depending on where you put them, when I first got here, I didn't have to flood. I've been here for 10 years in Colorado, so we didn't have, watering grass was always still, I love it now, but it was definitely hard for me to settle in that I had to do it, and do it well. So, but, you know, depending on where you put your lane, it can really affect the flooding. You know, so sometimes it can benefit you because it can spread out like a contour. Other times it can take the water where you don't want it to go because of the cow path. So, it's just something to think about.
Cameron, can I ask you a
Yes.
question?
Yes.
On the spots that you do fresh seeding,
Yes.
do you let that establish before you put them in the grazing paddock rotation, or like for a season?
Yeah.
If you got new shoots
I probably cut it the first year for hay and then,
versus
yeah.
grazing?
Yeah. But I mean, you could if you're just light, you know. But I don't want the hoof action to mess it up too much, you know. But yeah. It depends how good it took, because I feel like grass takes a little bit out here. You know, sometimes it's not the same here, you know, you really. But yeah, so for fertility, we don't use any fertilizer. We follow the grazing principles of rest periods and occupation, and period of occupation, and just you know, whatever comes up and down is dying below. So if you keep that growth up and you graze it, the roots are dying. You're building fertility with your grazing. You know, of course you can't have anything without water, so we got to mention that. The city open space key lined and subsoiled us a couple times in a couple spots, which helps just spread some
We
of
have
the
a lot
water.
of slopes on the land,
Yeah.
so we have a lot of, like, the water wants to pull
Sure.
into certain areas.
We compost 10 to 15 ton per acre every 5 years or so. We don't get it on every year, but we do put compost on the pasture, typically in November through February, depending. You know, I don't really want to spread it. I don't want to put it on and flood it out, you know. So it sort of sinks in over that time. And then we, of course, drag them if there's too much manure in one spot or whatever. We do graze draft horses a little bit. 3 hours a day is all. They don't need it anyway. And I'm a little more lax on the rotation with them. You can kind of see they're kind of picky, selective, they eat very low, they poop in one spot. I give them smaller pastures because it's only 3 hours a day. It's not very much. You know, we have 5 grazing horses. We have some pregnant mares. You got to watch the tall fescue because it can cause abortions in the late stage of the pregnancy. We do keep records. It's just at first, at least, it helps understand what did I do, what worked, what's going on. So
Or you can forget one year to the next.
Yeah.
What did really
Carl had a great picture of manure. I should have put one in there. It's really, you know, that's how we know if we're doing it right. You know, and I always say, you know, the proper manure should sound like people like it. It's like, you know, right? It's literally nature made the applause in there. It's crazy. It knows what a good poop is. We do if it gets really wet out, it doesn't get that wet a lot here. But if it does, we won't take them into the good pastures. We'll keep them in a sacrifice paddock. We don't have a ton of shade. When it's real hot, we gotta graze around the trees, give them those daytime pastures around trees.
Yeah, that is a challenge.
Yeah.
When we're above 90 degrees, we'll actually keep them in the barn yard during the day, eat hay, and stay a little cooler, and then eat graze in the evenings. We just don't have a lot of trees on the
Of
farm.
course, alfalfa bloating, you're gonna watch that. Typically for us, that would be in the summer, because sometimes while we're irrigating, the alfalfa's way ahead of the grass, and so we just gotta watch that with cows, of course, bloat. And we try to graze it differently. Some years we do hay here, and then we'll rotationally graze that, and other years we'll switch it. And then the lead follow chickens and heifers, you guys ever do that much? Or we don't do it. I just put it up there. People like to talk about it. I find it to be very labor intensive, so I don't do it.
Well,
Anyway.
we do graze, we do have pastures laying hens, but we.
Yeah, I don't try to
we just
follow the
lead
cows,
follow.
though, you know. It's a cool idea, it just takes a lot of labor, we don't have enough kids. Okay, observing good to know your pastures, that's something important for me. I love grass, and you know, anytime you have put your attention on something, you know, it creates more interest, and then it just keeps creating more attention. And so, you know, obviously it's hard to get our pastures out here to look quite like real moist, temperate areas on the East Coast and Midwest, but I think it's important to know your grasses, how they grow, how they work. It helps you connect with them, and it's a very enjoyable experience, you know, where you can get deeper into it. So in summary, thanks. So we kind of we want healthy animals, we want healthy grass, healthy soil, and then we want to be healthy ourselves and not overwork and stuff. So we kind of that's kind of holistic grazing, basically, right? It's like good for the animal, good for the grazer, and good for the plants and soil. So we're always balancing that out. Sometimes they do it great, and we're really ideal for the grass or the cow, and sometimes we just lax because it's not good for our family. Sunday, you got a basketball game to go to or something. We just kind of, I say, be flexible. I think that's the secret, just because everything's always changing. I just follow those grazing principles. That's kind of. That's it. You got me. I'm sorry, I butted it. I was just trying to get through. Sorry. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Cameron.